Hello and welcome to another training session. This is another in a series of videos to provide training on Active Planner. In the previous videos, we covered the installation of Active Planner as well as using the admin tool to create a new configuration. And today what we're going to do is go through the steps of taking our configuration and connecting it to the general ledger data. We will be using the open integration, which allows us to connect to virtually any general ledger data as long as you can get access to the accounts, chart of accounts, and balance information. Now, just as a quick overview, Active Planner does come in a few versions that have a direct connect to the general ledger data, which means we don't need to configure it. Those versions would be Sage Mass 500 and Sage Platinum for Windows. Also Epicor Enterprise. And there are also a couple what's called indirect integrations, which means there's very minor configurations. That would be the Sage Timberline and the Epicor iScala general ledgers. For all other general ledgers, we would use the open integration, and some of the general ledgers that we typically use would be things like Sage Backpack, Mass 90 and 200, MIP, also Epicor E9 and Vantage, as well as Microsoft Dynamics Great Plains and Navision, and QuickBooks. All right, let's go ahead and step through the process. Again, we're using the open integration, so we'll go ahead and launch that. And previously, we have created a brand new configuration named Training, and so we will log into the training configuration. Select that as our configuration, and we'll go to the company named Training. This is a new company that's never been configured, and the first time we touch it, it wants us to set up some configuration information beginning with the fiscal period setup. And so here we're just going to simply match the fiscal period as defined in our general ledger. So we give it a beginning and ending date, whether that be a single calendar year or a fiscal year that crosses calendar year boundaries. We can handle whatever is necessary. So by default, it's looking at January through December 31st, 2011. We'll go ahead and set that up as our first fiscal year. We want to create the periods automatically. And you'll see for the period increments, we have quite a few reasonable choices, typical choices. In our case, our data that we're using uses a simple monthly period, so we'll go ahead and select that and say OK. And you can see that it is correctly defined the 12 periods with their appropriate dates for those periods. I'll click OK and say yes, and now we've created our first fiscal period. Typically, we would want to go ahead and define future years. So let's do another year, and we'll go ahead and just set it to the fiscal year 2012. Create the periods automatically. Yes, they're monthly, and we're done. Let's go ahead and do some prior years as well. Typically, you would want to set up your periods to match your historical data. So let's go ahead and do some prior years. And we can use the ellipse to look up the date as well. So let's go ahead and set up fiscal year 2010. Create the periods automatically. And we're done. How about one more? And we'll go ahead and do 2009. Create the periods automatically. And we're done. Again, you would want to do this for all of your historical data, as well as setting up any needed future fiscal years. This is one thing as you're going through using the product from year to year. You may need to, or you probably will need to come back and each year add an additional fiscal year. And then we get the options, a few options that we can select here. Typically we leave these unchecked, so we'll go ahead and just do that. Now the next part is where we actually match the chart of accounts to what we're using in our general ledger. So the first thing we're going to do is set up the chart of accounts, the accounts number, and it's looking for a mask. Now our data that we're using uses a 4-segment general ledger number, where the first segment is the main account, the second is the location, or sometimes referred to as a division. The third is the department, and the fourth is a product. And the number of characters in each segment are 4, and then 3, and 3, and then 2 characters in the last segment. So what we're going to do is define our chart. And what we do is we start the first segment with an exclamation point, and that would represent the beginning of the segment, the first character in the beginning of the segment, and then 3 pound signs. So this, if we look at this and count the number of characters here, there's 4 characters. The exclamation is the first character in this segment. So that's how we get the 4 characters for segment 1. And then we'll put in a segment delimiter or separator. Some people use dashes, some people use dots, whatever you have in the GL, you would want to match that. And now we can define the second segment, which is 3 characters long. So we do exclamation pound pound. We use a dash for the separator, exclamation pound pound, a dash for the separator, and then the last segment is 2 characters. So we do exclamation and a single pound. Okay. And when we hit the tab, we see down below then that it recognizes that there are 4 segments, and it asks simply for the description of each segment. So the first segment was our natural account, our main account. Some people just call it chart. The second segment was our location. The third segment, our department. And the fourth segment was our product. The next thing we do is come over here to the balance codes, and this is just simply where we define not the codes themselves, but the maximum length. And so we'll just set that to the maximum, which is 16, and we'll do the same thing with the statistical balance code, set to a max of 16. And we can ignore the other tabs here. And we have set up the configuration with one exception. The last thing we'll want to do here is to go ahead and set up our balance code. In some general ledgers, this is referred to as the balance code, the balance key, sometimes the book ID. But we would want to match all of the balance codes that we're using in our general ledger. And in our case, we have just one balance code that's used, balance code of plan. So we'll just enter that and say that our balance type here is the budget. But we can, for those general ledgers that allow statisticals, you can also set up balance codes for your statistical types as well. Okay, that completes the setup for the configuration. Let's go ahead and take a look at creating the import scripts to bring in the chart of accounts and balances. So what we want to do here is just simply go to the Utilities menu and the Import. The import feature allows us to define the import scripts we need. So we're going to create a new one, and this would be our chart of accounts. It'll pop up with a little question. Do you want to use the import wizard? And I'm going to say no. I really prefer to step through this myself. First we want to look at is what kind of an import are we doing? Balances, transactions, or chart of accounts? We're going to start with the chart of accounts. And for the key, we'll go ahead and put in chart of accounts, and then we'll give it a description as well. And then we'll go to our data source. And this is where we simply point to the data that contains our chart of accounts. A variety of data sources that we can use. In our case, for what we're doing, we're going to use a Microsoft Access database. So we'll choose that as our data source, and then we'll go ahead and go find that. And so we've selected the source type, chosen the appropriate database. We'll do a quick test to make sure that we have access and permission to read from that data. And now we'll go to the query builder. And the first thing we see on the top is a list of all of the fields that we will need to populate in order to have a correctly defined import. And then down below, we see a list of the tables in the database that we've selected. So we are doing the chart of accounts, so we'll just look down through here and choose the table that contains the chart of accounts. So when I click on it and select it, to the right of it I see all the fields that are available for me to use in populating the fields or the table above. And so first thing I want to do is go back here to the account number, and from my available fields, choose the appropriate field that contains the account number. And for us, it's fairly simple. We can see that there's an account code, so we'll just select that to represent the account number. And next, we need a description, and we have an account description. We'll choose that. And now the next part is the credit. And if we look over here on the right, there's actually the definition of what we're looking for here. Please enter a 0 if these accounts are typically have a debit balance, or a 1 if these accounts typically have a credit balance. And some general ledgers in the chart of accounts table, they actually have a field for debit or credit. And so if you have that, it's very easy to select that. If not, it can be a little bit tricky, but typically we can find a definition for that. And in our case, what we're going to do is we're going to actually use the account type. And basically, what we know from our knowledge of the general ledger is that if the account type is greater than or equal to 200, and the account type is less than or equal to 449, then this would be a debit type. Actually, there's one more option here. It can also be equal to 600. And again, this would require knowledge of the general ledger. So these would be the credit types. So what I'm going to do is put a little function here, the absolute function, so that it returns it as a positive 1 or 0. Again, that could be sometimes the trickiest part is just getting the right definition there, but there's a good example of how you might create that. The next thing is the actual, and so what we want to do is just say whether or not what we're importing, that this chart is the chart for the actual accounts. Some general ledgers have a separate chart for budget and statistical. And in our case, we have just one chart, so we'll say that it is the actual chart, and 0 for the budget and statistical. And then what we can do is we can do a quick test of the query, and here's where it actually runs out and retrieves data from the source data. Take a look at that, and we can make sure that we are returning the correct values here. Okay. And again, if we look down here at the available fields, there's an active date, inactive date. So the other thing you may want to do when you create your own is to determine whether or not you want to pay attention to the to the active flag, and maybe create your chart based simply on the currently active account numbers. You can see here segment code 1 through 4. Sometimes we don't have a nice account number. We have to actually assemble it based on the individual segments, but that's also fairly easy to do in this little wizard, or the little tool here, the query builder. So, and the last thing is we want to come back here to the options tab and say that for future imports, what we do is go ahead and override any duplicated accounts with the newly imported data. And also we can remove the accounts based on the import account type. And we'll click OK. And we've created our chart of accounts import. And so let's go ahead and create our second import, which will be the actual balances. So what I'm going to do is click on the new button here. I'm going to create a new import. No, I don't want to use the wizard. So this will be our actual balances. And so we'll define the key and description. Type will be balance information. Our data source, once again, is going to be the same Microsoft Access database. So we'll just select that, test it, and go to our query builder. And again, the fields that are listed here are the unique fields that we need to populate for the balance information from our available tables. This is coming from our database. We will choose the GL balances table, and now we can see the fields that are available there. And again, just like before, we're going to walk our way down through filling in this form up here. So for the account number, we'll choose the account code. For the balance code, if we look over here, we'll see that this is the field that contains the balance code. The other thing we can do is we know that Active Planner does not have a balance code for actual balances, so we'll just put in 2 single quotes. That is effectively a null string. For the balance type, we can enter, if we look over here, we can see that we should be entering a 0 for actual, 1 for budget, 2 for statistical. And again, what we're importing here are actual, so we will enter 1. The next thing is to define the field that contains the net change. Looking at our available fields, we can see that we have debit and credit amounts, and sometimes if that's all we have, we can actually just simply do the math to take our credit minus the debit and compute the net change. Sometimes we have a net change field. The open integration version does not support multi-currency. So if you are in a situation where you have the multiple currencies, then you'll need to deal with that correctly. And it turns out that our data that we're using, we do actually have a few different currencies in this data. And so rather than just simply choosing the net change field, okay, we're going to choose the home net change, because this is where we actually have the various currencies converted into U.S. dollars. Now there will be multiple records for the same account number, because the account number will have a record for the U.S. dollars as well as perhaps the Canadian dollars or other currencies. So we will want to sum all of these together so that we have just a single total representing the full net change. And the next thing we'll do is the ending balance. And what we're going to do is just simply enter the current balance amount. the home current balance. So we'll do a sum of the home current balance, and that'll give us an ending balance. The balance date, here we're going to choose the field that contains the balance date. And the last item to fill in here is whether or not these balances are beginning balances or net change balances, and what we're bringing in are net change. So we will put a 0 in this field. Okay. And now the last thing we're going to do is just simply, because we do have the multiple records, what we'll need to do is to go ahead and group our data according to the account number and the date. So in our group by, we're going to choose the account code, and the balance date. And if we do a quick test of this, we should see, yep, the data that we're looking for, including the net change amounts and the balance dates. Click OK to save that. And the last thing we're going to do is just real quickly go ahead and actually run the imports. So remember, our actual balance was the first thing we created. And so we can actually run the import for that. And we'll let it retrieve the data. It scans it for invalid data, and then it inserts records into our chart of accounts table in Active Planner. So we'll give it just one quick second to finish there. And now it's finished, so we'll go on and take a look at the actual. Oops, sorry, that was the actual balances. I meant to do the chart first, but fortunately, it doesn't matter which one we do first. There was one small thing we forgot on the actual balances, which is simply come to the options, choose overwrite duplicate information, and then for existing balances, we would want to remove the balance information based on the imported chart, balance code, and fiscal year. So we'll just select that and click OK to save that. And now let's go ahead and run the chart of accounts. And we'll see that this is the import it's going to do, the select statements it's using. We will run that, and we'll see that it is retrieving the data, scanning it, and inserting new records. And that's done. Okay, so we've created the chart of accounts import as well as the actual balances, and we run that. Let's take a quick look at where you can see this information now that it has been imported. So for the account numbers, we can go to the Open Integration folder, and when we click on the accounts in our detail pane here, we can see that these are the account numbers, and also see which accounts have been marked as type credit and which ones are debit. Also, we can take a look at the balance folder, and this would contain the balance information. And we can see here then the information for the balances. And so this is where we can take a look at the imported balance information. And if we take a look at this, the first thing we'll notice is that everything is saying that it is of type budget. So what I did is I intentionally created an incorrect import script just so we can go through the process of maintaining that. And so what I want to do is just simply come back here and take these three records that are created here, and these were supposed to be of type actual, but I put the wrong flag on there. So what I want to do is just step through the process to show you how quickly and easily I can delete this imported data. I'll select all three, and I'll do a delete. Do you want to delete it? Yes. And just that easily, we removed the invalid import. And so now let's take a quick second and go back and to our import script, our actual balance. So maintain that. If we take a look at the query builder, okay, for the balance type, again, if we read the directions over here, enter a 0 for actual balances, 1 for budget, 2 for statistical. And you can see that I simply entered a 1 instead of a 0, because what we are importing are actuals. So let me just simply make that quick adjustment here. We'll say OK to save it. And now I can rerun the actual balance import. So we'll go ahead and run that. And pause for a second while it completes. And now that that is completed, I'll go ahead and close the report. And if we come back here, we can see now that we have type actual for fiscal year 2009, 2010, and 2011. And so if we open up one of these balance fiscal year balances, go to the detail information, what we can see here is that Active Planner is going to give us a list of the accounts and the period balances. So we'll let it go ahead and populate the chart. And it should be done in here in just 1 second, and we'll take a look at the data. Okay. So here we can see the various account number, the description, and the period balances. Okay, that concludes today's video and this training session. We will look forward to meeting with you again during one of our upcoming video training sessions. Thank you.